The Japanese accent is a notorious one that I am especially keen to growing up in a household with fluent Japanese speakers. My father's native language was Mandarin, but he learned Japanese in adulthood to the point of fluency. He settled in Japan for a little more than a decade before moving to America and learning English. When I was younger, I distinctly remember him having trouble pronouncing Mass F. He pronounced it as something along the lines of Masabu, reflecting a very typical Japanese pronunciation. As the years went by, he was able to distinguish between sounds b and v and produce those sounds in contrastive environments. From his experience, it seems plausible for a speaker to discriminate between sounds that are not contrastive in their native language. So then I thought to myself, what other sounds are similar to the b and v scenario? The sounds r and l first come to mind. The r and l phones are non-existent in Japanese. Instead, what is typically romanized as R, like in Naruto, is really a flap. Between the two sounds r and l is actually closer in sound to the flap. When a native Japanese speaker is learning English, they won't be able to perceive and produce the sounds r and l. Native Japanese speakers will find other similar sounds when they stumble upon words with these two sounds. A common replacement is wu.
Wee wee.
Wee wee? Wee wee? Did you say wee wee?
In this example, really is pronounced as wee wee. Not only did the speaker not distinguish between the two sounds r and l, he replaced the sounds with wu. But the speaker, like any other speaker, can learn contrastive sounds that are not contrastive in their L1. However, the more different an L1 sound is to the closest L2 sound, the easier it is to learn. This can be demonstrated by native Japanese speakers who learn to perceive and produce sounds r and l. But how much does linguistic experience affect the ability to learn new sounds? It seems like your native language, which is comprised of a set of sounds, does make it more difficult to learn certain sounds. But it is entirely possible to perceive and produce sounds that are not contrastive in your native language, but is in a second language. Let's take a look at a study that Miyawaki and his team conducted. Japanese speakers who intensively study English had a difficult time perceiving the difference between r and l in speech-like contexts. But they were able to perceive the difference, as well as native American English speakers when the sound was presented in isolation. This is direct evidence that native Japanese speakers have the potential to learn r and l. The interesting thing is that Japanese speakers do not have the same amount of difficulty learning r and l. R is actually easier to learn than l. The best explanation for this is a speech learning model hypothesis. So the speech learning model hypothesis states that the more distant the target L2 sound is to the closest L1 sound, the easier the target phonetic segment is to learn, since it would be easier to discern the difference. We can begin to produce a new sound once we notice a difference between the L1 and the L2 sound. Whether it be we notice the shape of the mouth or the movement of the tongue, all these things can help us perceive and produce a new sound. This hypothesis helps us understand why r is easier to learn than l is for native Japanese speakers. Again, r is easier to learn than l because it is more dissimilar to the closest sound in Japanese, the flap. So with all this in mind, we can begin to think about how we can more effectively learn new languages. In the modern world, multilingualism is becoming more and more desirable. Perhaps this is just one of the ways we must ponder upon to make language learning a more fluid process.